I used to think of my wife as my best friend, someone I could lean on without question, someone I trusted with everything. But when she crossed a line, I never saw it coming. Tonight, I was hoping for a nice evening, but something was gnawing at me. For the first time in years, I squeezed into my dark blue tuxedo, feeling sharp but completely out of place. Normally, I'd be kicked back in my favorite chair with a drink in hand, but instead, I found myself at a fundraising event, one of the big social occasions in our small Midwest town. I had asked my wife to dress up and she went all out, maybe a little too much. She looked incredible, sure, but there was something about the way she dressed that was almost too provocative. At 35, she was at her prime, beautiful enough to turn heads as she floated down the stairs in a maroon dress that left little to the imagination. And she knew it. Despite how she looked, though, she was still my wife, and I made sure everyone knew it. As much as I'd rather have been home, she seemed perfectly comfortable mingling with the town's elites, her natural charm effortlessly pulling people toward her. When I came back from the bar, I noticed her locked in a deep conversation with Senator Darius Parkinson, the guy everyone says looks like Tom Cruise. I could tell right away she was mesmerized by him. She barely noticed me standing there. Feeling like a third wheel, I gave the senator a polite reminder that the seat he was standing by was mine. He kept on talking like I wasn't even there, so I put our drinks down between them, forcing him to acknowledge me. He finally did, but in a way that felt more dismissive than respectful, and then sauntered off to his seat like I was some kind of nuisance. Anger boiled inside me as I sat back down, muttering about what a fool he was. My wife, of course, took his side, accusing me of being rude to a senator, of all things. I reminded her that we had boundaries in our marriage, but she just rolled her eyes, the one gesture that always drove me up a wall. Not wanting to cause a scene, I let it slide for now. When dinner wrapped up and the band started playing, I asked my wife to dance, hoping to salvage the night. She turned me down cold, and it stung. So, while she socialized, I kept an eye on the senator, who eventually slipped out to the veranda. Something didn't feel right, so I followed him out there, and sure enough, there he was, arm around my wife, talking in low, intimate tones. I tried to step in, but someone blocked my path, telling me to leave the senator alone. "That's my wife he's got his arm around," I growled as I was shoved back into the ballroom. Furious, I demanded my wife return to me, threatening to make a scene if she didn't. The senator's aide cursed under his breath and went to retrieve her. When she finally came back, looking a bit flustered, I grabbed her hand and dragged her out of the event. The drive home was tense and silent at first. Then she exploded, accusing me of embarrassing her in front of everyone. I shot back, reminding her of the boundaries we set in our marriage. "You're acting like some jealous teenager," she snapped, her face flushed with anger. Eventually, she clammed up, though, seeming to realize I had a point. That tension carried over into the next few days, affecting the kids, making every meal feel strained and awkward. By Wednesday, she insisted we have a serious talk, which I knew was a bad sign. It didn't take long for things to spiral. She casually announced that she planned to go to another fundraiser with the senator, calling it a non-date. I immediately objected, questioning why she thought that was appropriate. She brushed me off, claiming she hadn't done anything wrong. I pushed back, pointing out the double standard with her friend Nicole, who she never approved of when I spent time with her. Her response only confirmed my suspicions. "It's not the same, and you know it," she argued. "Going out with a U.S. senator is completely different than hanging out with some random guy. Right, Gloria? You can't be serious here, we're married." I reminded her, my voice tightening with frustration, that we had made vows. "You don't own me, Ronald," she shot back, her eyes cold. "We might be married, but that doesn't mean you control my life." "I'm not trying to control you," I argued, my tone softening. "You're the mother of our kids. I'm trying to keep our family together." "You're being ridiculous," she dismissed me, refusing to acknowledge just how bad things were getting. But then the next blow came. On the night of her so-called non-date, Gloria came downstairs wearing a stunning white gown that took my breath away. The kids were in awe, asking why their mom was dressed up like a movie star. She fumbled for an answer, but I wasn't going to sugarcoat anything. I told them straight. She was going out with Senator Parkinson. When the doorbell rang, I gave her an ultimatum, him or us. She opened the door to find a security guard waiting beside a sleek black limo. "Behave for Daddy," she said as she left, leaving me standing there, stunned, while our kids watched. I wasn't about to drown my sorrows in alcohol, so I decided to make a few FaceTime calls. One to my parents and one to hers. The kids loved talking to their grandparents, and for a while the tension lifted. When Gloria's parents asked where she was, I didn't lie. "She's out on a date with Senator Darius Parkinson," I said, my voice flat. The shock on their faces was instant. They couldn't believe I'd let her go. I tried to explain how I'd reasoned with her, but it was clear she had made up her mind. The kids, thankfully, took over the conversation, giving us all a brief escape. My mother-in-law advised patience and understanding, while my parents, less forgiving, suggested I call a lawyer. After a few calls, I ordered pizza, watched a Disney movie with the kids, and spent the rest of the night flipping through ESPN, unable to sleep. Morning came and I made pancakes and bacon, trying to reassure the kids that their mom would be back soon, though I wasn't so sure. Sure enough, around 1 p.m., the black limo pulled into the driveway, catching the eyes of both our kids and the neighbors. Usually, the kids would rush to greet their mom, but this time they hung back, disappointed and unsure. She stepped out of the car still wearing that same white dress from the night before, now wrinkled and tired-looking. I sat in the living room as she walked in, her greeting barely a whisper. "Looks like you and the kids managed without me," she said. "We did fine," I replied, my voice sharper than I intended. She headed upstairs for a shower, leaving me sitting there, realizing that our marriage was all but over. My focus shifted entirely to the kids, determined not to become a weekend dad. Maybe I could stick around until they graduated high school, at least. When Gloria finally reappeared at 7 p.m., I had already made dinner and mentioned there were leftovers in the fridge. She gave me a weak smile. The kids, sensing the tension, kept their distance. Later, when we were alone, Gloria accused me of turning the kids against her. I denied it, pointing out that her actions had done enough damage on their own. "I'm not the one who broke up our family," she said, her tone defensive. "That's on you. If you can get over your insecurities, we can fix this. But if you keep being petty and hostile, then we're done, and you'll be just another part-time dad," she warned, catching me completely off guard. I expected remorse, but instead, I got defiance. "It's 1 in the afternoon, Gloria," I shot back. "You couldn't get enough last night? Had to squeeze in a half-day fling too." She hesitated, avoiding my eyes. "We can still move past this, you know? Things can go back to the way they were. I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry for that, but I needed to do this for myself." "I don't regret it," she said without a hint of remorse. "That's a sorry excuse for an apology if that's what it's supposed to be," I replied. "You're not sorry for what you did, just for the fact that it hurt me." She tried to defend herself, saying, "It was an incredible experience for me." I matched her conviction, firing back, "And it came at the cost of betraying everything we promised each other. Our vows, our family." I couldn't help but recall the look on her face when I found her hiding out in the guest bedroom that night, shocked that I'd caught on so quickly. She then shifted the blame again. "We can't fix this unless you're willing to try," she pleaded. But I wasn't having it. "No," I said firmly. "It's way too late for that now." With that, I closed the door, shutting her out, literally and figuratively. That night, after 2 exhausting days of tension, I slept like a rock. The next morning, I stuck to our usual Sunday routine, whipping up Belgian waffles for brunch. As we sat down to eat, Amelia, my youngest, piped up, "Mom looks like she hasn't slept at all. Maybe you should go out more on Friday nights," I suggested a bit too sharply. Gloria immediately broke down, bursting into tears and fleeing to the bedroom, leaving the kids confused. "Did I say something wrong?" Amelia asked, her innocent eyes searching mine. "No, sweetie," I reassured her gently. "Mommy probably just misses the waffles." Later, while I was relaxing in my lazy boy, trying to enjoy the Cubs game, the bedroom door flew open, and Gloria stormed in, spouting off in a frenzy. She was ranting so fast I couldn't make sense of it. "Calm down, Gloria," I said, trying to keep my cool. "I can't understand a word when you're like this." Through her sobs, she accused me of making her look bad in front of her parents. "You've made me seem like some kind of Kardashian," she spat. Just then, Amelia wandered into the room and innocently asked, "What's a Kardashian, Mommy?" Gloria and I exchanged a quick look, and she quickly sent the kids off to their rooms before turning her anger back on me. "What exactly did you say to them?" she demanded, her face twisted with frustration. "I didn't lie," I said, shrugging. "I told them the truth. You were off at a fundraiser trailing after a senator. If they took my side, that's not my fault. And just so you know, my mom had pretty much the same reaction. So good luck when she comes around." She started to object but caught herself. "It's not like that," she mumbled, but I cut her off. "An amazing experience, huh?" I said, not bothering to hide my sarcasm. Her glare could have burned a hole through me, but I didn't care. I motioned for her to move, needing to see the game, and she stormed off. For the next couple of weeks, I took up residence in the guest room, telling the kids I had a cold and didn't want their mother to catch it. Amelia, being as sharp as she was for a 7-year-old, probably figured out it was a lie, but to her credit, she kept quiet about it. Then, one night, after Gloria had gone to bed, I slipped back into our room. When the alarm went off the next morning, she snuggled into me like nothing had happened. "This feels right," she whispered, trying to bridge the gap between us. She reached out to touch me, but I stopped her, gently pulling her hand away. I turned to face her. "Before we go any further, I need you to get tested and show me the results," I said quietly. "You might trust the senator, but I don't." Her eyes filled with tears, and she looked like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. She just nodded, and I knew then that she hadn't even used protection with him. Things were getting messier than I'd imagined. I had initially thought I could stick it out until the kids finished high school. 14 more years until Luke would leave for college. My love for them gave me the strength to consider it. But the thought of being under the same roof with her for that long, with her still looking as good as she did, was starting to feel unbearable. My feelings for her had cooled off in the past couple of weeks, but the situation itself was only getting hotter. Her leaving the bed in silence didn't sting like it used to. I wasn't about to comfort her when my own heart was still too raw. Who was this woman now? The Gloria I had married would have never believed this was okay. We had met in college, started dating 3 months later, and married within 2 years. She had always been precise and honest, an actuary after all. Her level-headedness used to balance out my more spontaneous side. I thought we'd make it to 50 years of marriage together. But then Senator Darius Parkinson came into the picture and wrecked everything. 10 days after I'd moved back into our bed, she handed me an envelope when I got home from work. Inside was her clean bill of health. "Hope you're satisfied," she said, her voice cold. "I may never be able to face Dr. Patel again." This was humiliating. "Not my problem," I replied flatly. "You wouldn't have to go through this if you just stayed faithful." She let out a soft hiss, but there was no arguing with that. As she walked away, I asked, "How often has the senator been in touch with you?" She started to answer, but I silenced her with a wave. She grimaced and handed me her phone. I scrolled through texts and calls, finding plenty of communication but no evidence of any more meetings. "Damn it," I muttered. "We're on thin ice." "Agreed," she said quietly, pocketing her phone and heading into the kitchen. That night, she tried to show me affection in bed, and I gave in, but it wasn't about her anymore. It was just me giving in to my own needs. I could tell she was trying to win me back, but my mind was already somewhere else. Gloria's sudden return to normal life caused quite a stir around the neighborhood. The looks I got from the men were sympathetic, while the women smirked as if they knew something I didn't. One night, Amelia came up to me and asked about a club her friends' moms were talking about. I held it together, explaining that her mom had made a mistake and that everything would be okay. I hugged her tightly, hiding the pain that would haunt me for a long time. Things eventually started to feel normal again, at least on the surface. But I knew deep down that it was a new kind of normal. No matter what Gloria said, things between us were never going to be the same. I couldn't trust her, and I sure as hell couldn't forget the betrayal she had thrown in my face, and our family's face. As Tina Turner would say, "What's love got to do with any of this?" 6 months later, Gloria seemed to have either realized something important or found the nerve to speak up. That night, after she initiated things, I turned away from her to sleep, as had become our routine. Before she spoke, I could hear her sniffling, trying to hold back tears. "Ronald, can we talk?" she asked in a small, soft voice. I sighed heavily. "What's up? Can you at least turn around and face me?" she said, irritation creeping into her tone. Sighing again, I reluctantly turned over to meet her gaze. Her eyes darted to mine, looking for some kind of connection. "Do you even realize how long it's been since we were really close?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Say it." "I've already said it," I replied, trying to stay calm. "You had the courage to do what you did, so have the guts to admit it. We haven't been close since you went on that date." "I know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You make sure I'm satisfied physically, but that's all it is now. There's no warmth, no real closeness, and you haven't even hugged me since that night. I miss that." "You can't even bring yourself to say what you did, Gloria," I said, my frustration showing. "You cheated on me with him. Admit it. I'm not a fool. You went on a date, didn't come home until the next day, and now you're surprised we aren't the same," she protested. "It wasn't like that. Yes, we were intimate that night, and yes, it was unforgettable. He was gentle, kind, just like you used to be. It's not the same anymore because you can't get past it." My jaw clenched. "Yeah, I get it, Gloria. It was unforgettable for you. That's why we're no longer making love. You gave something that was supposed to be mine to him, and you loved every second of it. It was one night, Ronald. 2 days out of hundreds we've spent together over the years. Why can't we just move on from this if you're willing to try?" she pleaded. "Thanks for the math lesson," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "But I've never seen our marriage as a numbers game. Would you feel the same if I had a fling with Anna Smith? You know, the divorced blonde down the street with the great body? Half the wives on this block keep a close eye on their husbands when she's around." Her eyes went wide. "Wait, are you telling me you want Anna?" "No way." I shook my head. "Listen to yourself. I never said I wanted Anna. I was just curious how you'd react if I did the same thing." She stared at me, confused for a moment, and then it clicked. Her face twisted with anger. "I can read between the lines," she said bitterly. "You don't have to spell it out." Ignoring her rising temper, I said, "You know, because of your little affair, the other kids at school started picking on Amelia. Their moms have been calling you every name under the sun, and the kids hear it." Her anger shifted into shock. "Amelia never said anything to me," she whispered, her face paling. "I didn't know." "Well, now you do," I said, the bitterness in my voice cutting through. "Sorry isn't going to fix this. That unforgettable night you had? It wasn't just unforgettable because of what you did. It was unforgettable because it was the moment you betrayed us." I turned away from her and went to bed, not caring what she did next. To her credit, over the next few months, she actually started trying to be a better mother. I'd always been the one to handle the majority of the kids' activities, but suddenly, Gloria was taking over, driving them around, being more involved, and offering warmth I hadn't seen in a long time. It was as if she finally realized that if she didn't prioritize family, we'd be done for good. The kids seemed to enjoy the extra attention, but my daughter Amelia, wise beyond her 8 years, wasn't fooled. "Mom's really trying hard, Daddy," she told me one afternoon. "I hope she gets a proper apology for whatever she did wrong." I tried to smile for her sake, but inside, I was torn. Everything seemed okay on the surface. We kept up appearances. Gloria was working hard to win me over and keep up the facade of normalcy, but deep down we were just two people living in the same house, sharing a few things but nothing like what we used to have. I knew she hoped I'd eventually give in, but I couldn't shake the memory of what she'd done. The love I had for her, the 9 years she'd been my world, felt hollow now. It didn't help that she kept texting the senator, as if they were still in contact. I'd been keeping tabs on her phone since that night, cloning it without her knowledge. Sure, she hadn't crossed any lines lately, but the messages were still there. A month ago, he'd texted her, "Can we meet up soon? I'll be in town." She had replied, "My husband's still mad about last time. I can't risk it." I was disgusted, but not surprised. A few weeks later, we celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary at Chuck E. Cheese with the kids. They had a blast, but Gloria was sulking the entire time. She waited until the kids were distracted with their games before she let me have it. "We've always celebrated our anniversary with something special for just the two of us," she said angrily. "But here we are, and you're ruining the tradition because you're still holding a grudge. When did you become so petty?" I didn't flinch. "The answer to that is the same as the answer to all your questions about your date with him. You did this to us." She sighed, clearly frustrated. "Can't you just move past this already? How often do you two still talk?" I asked bluntly. Her lips curled into a slight smirk as she pulled out her phone and handed it to me. I tossed it in the air and caught it, not even bothering to look. "I'm sure you've deleted anything incriminating," I said flatly. "But I bet there are records still out there of old texts and calls. Why haven't you cut him off completely?" Her face flushed, and she looked away. The silence was answer enough. In the middle of all this, my job and the kids were the only things keeping me sane. My coworkers could see the toll it was taking. They'd ask if I was okay, mentioning how tired I looked. I felt like I was on the verge of an ulcer, not to mention my drinking had picked up. Most nights, I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering where it all went wrong. Gloria still claimed to love me, insisting what she did with the senator didn't change how she felt about our marriage. She regretted hurting me, but she felt no guilt. I was just waiting for the other shoe to drop. Strangely, my mother-in-law had become a surprising source of support through all this. She apologized multiple times for her daughter's behavior, telling me, "We're sorry, Ronald. We didn't raise her to be so selfish. I know you're doing your best for the kids. I just hope you can find it in yourself to move forward." One hot summer afternoon, I grabbed a cooler of beer and headed outside for our monthly neighborhood picnic. The grills were going, the food spread was huge, and the weather couldn't have been more perfect. 80 degrees with a light breeze. These gatherings were something the whole neighborhood looked forward to. As I walked through the house to get back outside, I heard voices coming from our home office. The office was usually off-limits to non-family members, so I intended to redirect them to the family room. As I got closer, I realized it was Gloria and her friend talking. "Yeah, when Ronald takes charge, I can't help but think of him," Gloria said, her voice soft but full of something that made my stomach turn. "He's so assertive and focused, and sometimes I still remember that night. I'll cherish it forever." I froze, my legs weak under me. How many people knew about this? Laughter followed, and I felt the world spin around me. There were 3 of them in that room, and the instant I realized what I'd overheard, my stomach turned. I barely made it to the restroom in time, feeling sick as I emptied everything I'd eaten and drunk that day. The nausea wasn't just physical. It was from the gut punch of betrayal I'd been trying to process for months. After cleaning myself up, I grabbed the cooler of beers I'd meant to bring outside and headed toward the grill, handing them out to the guys. "Ronald, you okay? You look kind of off," Marvin Elmers asked, giving me a concerned glance. "Yeah, I'm good," I mumbled, brushing him off as I drifted away. I stayed silent for the rest of the picnic, trying to shake the feeling that every woman there was smirking at me, their eyes following me like they knew something I didn't. Maybe I was just being paranoid, or maybe Gloria had made me the laughingstock of the neighborhood. Either way, I kept my head down. Later that night, after we'd put the kids to bed and cleaned up the house, I couldn't hold back anymore. Gloria was lounging comfortably in a chair, sipping on a wine cooler like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just made a joke of our entire marriage. I sat down next to her, ready to confront her. Did anyone at today's picnic not know about your affair? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked up, caught off guard. I might have mentioned it to a couple of friends recently, she chuckled, almost proudly. I mean, it was quite the experience. The senator's a charming guy. I couldn't help but share a few details. That hit me hard. So, first you cheat, then you turn me into the town fool, making sure every woman in the neighborhood knows I've been betrayed. I said, my voice rising. Her face hardened. It was one mistake, Ronald. I didn't sleep with some stranger in a dirty motel. It wasn't like that. She stood up, her voice growing louder. I've had enough of this. You've been dragging this out for over a year now. I had an affair with another man, someone strong, someone handsome. Get over it already. I'm not going to keep being a prisoner to your insecurities. You need to make a choice, either file for divorce or accept reality. But I'm done pretending we're some perfect couple. Decide now. Her words cut through me like a knife. I just sat there, frozen, while she stormed off. By the time I snapped out of it, she was long gone. I've always been slow to react, keeping my emotions under control when others might panic. People like Gloria saw that as a weakness, mistaking my calm for indecision. But inside, I was raging. The thought of losing my kids tore at me, but I couldn't keep pretending things were okay. I had already braced myself for the worst. I had a lawyer on standby, just waiting for me to pull the trigger. First thing Monday morning, I did just that. Gloria was served with divorce papers by the end of the day, right at her workplace. As I expected, she was furious. 5 minutes later, my phone started blowing up with her calls. I ignored everyone, knowing what was waiting for me when I got home. The second I walked in from the garage, she exploded. You idiot, she screamed. Your fragile ego gets bruised, and your response is to humiliate me in front of my colleagues, just like you've embarrassed me in front of our friends and neighbors. You practically begged me to file. I shot back. So I did. She glared at me, but she had no comeback. Instead, she stormed off, leaving me to face the aftermath alone. I went straight to the kids, telling them as gently as I could that even though Mom and I wouldn't be living together anymore, I'd always be there for them. Amelia, having friends with divorced parents, took it better than I expected. Luke, on the other hand, was confused and upset. I knew he'd struggle, but I hoped Amelia would help him through it. Living in a no-fault divorce state, I had expected the process to be somewhat smooth. Gloria would likely get the house, primary custody, child support, and probably some alimony. But she fought me on everything. Her lawyer dragged it out, using every trick in the book, pointless meetings, even suggesting we go to marriage counseling. In one of those sessions, I looked at her and asked, "Why are you doing this? You say you love me, but everything you've done says otherwise. You cheated on me and then bragged to your friends that the senator was the best you've ever had. Why would I want to stay in a marriage that only brings me misery? I love my kids, but if I stay with you, all they'll remember is their dad turning bitter." "I do love you, Ronald," she pleaded. "Are you really going to throw everything away over one incident? Yes, he was amazing, but it was just one mistake. Please, forgive me." "I can't," I said, my voice firm. "You broke our vows. You disrespected everything we built, and I can't just pretend like it didn't happen. I never intended for things to escalate this far, but everyone has a breaking point, and I'd hit mine. I'd been keeping a backup plan in my back pocket, and now it was time to use it. After the affair, I reached out to a lawyer with connections and got in touch with the chairman of the opposing political party. They were desperate for anything that could damage Senator Parkinson's career. In exchange for evidence, they offered a significant reward, and we struck a deal. They could only release the information when I gave the green light. This month, we decided it was time. The meeting was set up in my lawyer's office. After the usual introductions, I placed a sealed plastic bag on the table. The chairman's eyes widened as he stared at it. "Dear God, is that what I think it is?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "If you think it's evidence that could end the senator's career, then yeah," I replied calmly. He didn't touch the bag, just stared at it like it was some kind of treasure. I leaned back and recounted what had happened. After she came home from her little date, she went upstairs for a shower, probably assuming I wouldn't check the laundry. But I did. I waited until she was in the shower, then found her underwear at the bottom of the hamper. We all know what DNA evidence can do these days. When you test it, you'll find 2 different sets. I also brought her toothbrush just in case. You'll need to get the senator's DNA to match it, unless you've already got it. The chairman nodded, understanding everything I didn't need to say. Why are you doing this? His expression asked silently. Because she was arrogant enough to think I'd just forgive her, I said bitterly. She betrayed me and assumed I'd roll over and move on. She flaunts it in front of me like I'm supposed to forget it ever happened. To hell with her, and to hell with the senator she rode in on. I leaned back, watching as the chairman's mind raced. Your career is over, Darius. Damn you, Parkinson. I thought, feeling a sense of grim satisfaction settle over me. How could your pathetic husband get evidence of our weekend together? Senator Parkinson's voice roared through the phone, directed at Gloria a week after my meeting with the chairman. I could hear her stumble over her words, caught completely off guard. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, clearly rattled. That call took me by surprise. I had long since stopped cloning her phone and had already admitted months ago that I'd been keeping tabs on her conversations back then. She thought their line of communication had been clean ever since. Later, when I returned her call about 90 minutes after she tried to reach me, she cut right to the chase. What did you do? She demanded. Though we both knew exactly what she meant, I decided to play dumb. Well, I just ordered a pepperoni pizza and some garlic bread. Why? You worried about my diet now? Her temper flared. Stop messing around. You did something to upset Parkinson. He just threatened me over something you did. But he wouldn't say what. Thanks for that. Now my parents are furious, yours too, and Amelia is barely speaking to me. And you still don't seem to understand that what Darius and I did had nothing to do with our marriage. Yeah, about that, I started. Senator Parkinson, who had been a sure bet for re-election, abruptly dropped out of the race 8 months before the election, claiming mental fatigue. It was all over the news, but in the chaos of my own life, I hadn't really paid attention to the fallout. One day, Amelia casually brought up something I hadn't expected. Daddy, when are you going to start seeing other women? She asked, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. It was the second weekend she and Luke were staying with me. I nearly dropped my coffee. What? I asked, stunned. Linda's mom really wants to go out with you, Amelia said, grinning. My jaw hit the floor. Lost in the mess of divorce and just trying to keep my head above water for the kids. Dating had been the last thing on my mind. And you're okay with that? I asked, still shocked. Well, she didn't tell me directly, Dad, Amelia explained. I overheard her talking about it with Annie's mom. But yeah, I'm fine with it. Just, please not Marcy's mom. None of us kids liked her. She smiled, so innocent but clearly understanding more than I'd given her credit for. Kids pick up on things. Linda's mom, Susan, had been divorced for about 5 years. She was a lively blonde, still carrying some of that cheerleader energy from high school. I had never considered that she might be interested in me. When you're married, you don't think about other women. Or at least I didn't. I guess I was naive. Amelia kept watching me closely. It's okay, Dad. I'm almost 9. I get what divorce is. Luke and I will be fine. You just need to take care of yourself. It felt like I was being thrown into the dating pool without a life jacket. Susan became my first date since re-entering the scene, and while it felt nice, it was also awkward and forced. I told her I wasn't ready for anything serious, having just started this whole process again. She smiled kindly and reassured me that I didn't owe anyone any explanations. Susan gave me good advice, like a crash course on how to manage life as a divorced parent. She even joked that other divorced moms might start noticing me now. Being a decent father with a steady career had apparently become attractive in our small circle. She blushed a little when she added that last part. I went on a few more dates with Susan and a couple of other divorced women from the neighborhood. It was strange. For once, Gloria wasn't on my mind. I wasn't thinking about our failed marriage or her betrayal. Sure, I felt lonely at times, but not enough to even consider reconciling with Gloria. That was never going to happen. Gloria, on the other hand, kept brushing off her affair as a foolish mistake, promising it wouldn't happen again. A foolish mistake? I sneered. It wasn't just a mistake, Gloria. It was selfish, disrespectful, and reckless. You chose a fling with a senator over your family's well-being. Her mouth opened and closed, like she wanted to defend herself but couldn't find the words. I half expected her to keep pushing, but she stayed silent. After all, contacting Parkinson now was a dead end. One Saturday, while we were having dinner, my ex-mother-in-law casually mentioned that the senator had cut ties with Gloria for good. He told her never to contact him again. He thinks you somehow forced his hand into dropping out of the race, she said, shaking her head. I raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything, just kept eating my meal. I had no reason to offer any explanation. A few months later, some of my coworkers suggested going to a new upscale bar in town. Now that I was single, I wasn't turning down the occasional Thursday night out. Four of us grabbed a table, ordered drinks, and settled into the lively atmosphere. I noticed two women as soon as they walked in. One, a dark-haired woman in her early 40s, was dressed to draw attention. Blue silk shirt slightly unbuttoned and a short skirt that showed off long, toned legs. She moved with a confidence that was impossible to ignore. Her friend, though, was more refined. Probably around the same age, but with shoulder-length silver blonde hair and a more elegant style. A high-end sweater and skirt. She radiated wealth and sophistication. Several men immediately took notice, especially the brunette, who accepted every dance invitation with enthusiasm. I couldn't help but feel drawn to her, but my eyes kept drifting back to the blonde, who danced sparingly, moving with a grace that caught my attention. An hour later, I decided to approach the blonde and ask her to dance. But as I made my way toward their table, the brunette grabbed my hand and pulled me onto the dance floor. I forgot about her friend entirely. We danced through upbeat songs, and when the tempo slowed, she leaned in and kissed me. I was mesmerized. One thing led to another, and we ended up at my place. That night, Rosie, as she introduced herself, shared bits of her life with me. She and her friend were celebrating her recent divorce. Rosie turned out to be an incredible lover, and we dated for about a month before she confessed she wasn't ready for commitment, having just ended her own marriage. I respected her decision, and we parted on good terms. But even after that, I couldn't help but wonder about her friend, the blonde. A few weeks later, I found myself alone in the bar of another upscale spot, looking for a little solace with a drink. It wasn't my weekend to have the kids, so I had some time to myself. I was mid-drink when a woman walked in, catching the attention of everyone in the room. She had a body that could stop traffic, curves like Megan Thee Stallion, with rich brown waves cascading over her shoulders. She strutted into the bar like she owned the place, confidently walking in 4-inch stilettos before settling down beside me. For a moment, I thought I'd stepped into a dream. I fumbled in my mind for something clever to say, but before I could open my mouth, she met my eyes and asked, "What are you drinking?" Caught off guard, I flashed a grin, trying to match her cool. "Whiskey neat," I replied, envious of how effortlessly poised she was. "Excellent choice," she purred. "A man with impeccable taste," she added, ordering the same drink. The evening flew by as she told me about the boutique marketing company she'd built from the ground up. She wasn't just stunning. She was smart, driven, and successful. Later that night, we found ourselves at her chic apartment, where she mentioned how she preferred making love in her own bed, explaining the psychology behind it in a way that made perfect sense. With her toned physique and youthful energy, I could hardly believe she was 45. That night was unforgettable. She was an incredible kisser, and we connected on a level I hadn't felt since the early days with Gloria. Her name was Louise Jackson, and in just one night, she opened up to me in ways Gloria never did over our 9 years together. Louise was upfront about her priorities. Her career came first, and she had no desire for children. She enjoyed casual relationships, even though she admitted she had some real feelings for me. But we both knew a traditional relationship wasn't on the table. So we agreed to be friends with benefits, a comfortable arrangement that lasted about a year, until Louise met a younger man and fell for him. Even after the divorce, my ex-mother-in-law and I stayed close. We were bound by our love for the kids, and despite everything, we respected each other. One afternoon, she hesitantly asked me for a favor. "Ronald, would you mind doing me a small favor?" she asked cautiously. "As long as it doesn't involve your daughter," I joked. She smiled and went on to explain. "I'd like you to take my personal assistant to the company Christmas party. She's been through a rough divorce. Her husband was an abusive cheater, and she hasn't dated since. I think she needs to see that not all men are terrible. And honestly, you're just the decent guy she needs right now. It's not every day your former mother-in-law tries to set you up on a date." "Just one thing, Mom," I teased. "Please tell me she's not boring." She laughed. "Trust me, Ronald. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. And hey, maybe you'll let us keep the kids for a night or two." She was right, I was surprised. Valerie, as she preferred to be called, was charming, with a warm personality and a figure that turned heads. She had this habit of wrinkling her nose and squinting her green eyes when she laughed, and I found it irresistibly cute. All evening, I made sure to give her my full attention, and she seemed to appreciate it. We sat at a table with my ex-in-laws. Gloria's mom was as graceful as ever, and her dad, though reserved at first, warmed up as the evening went on. When it came time to hit the dance floor, I showed off the moves I'd honed over the years trying to please Gloria. Valerie matched me step for step, especially with the faster numbers. And when it came to the slow dances, we moved like we'd been partners for years. The feel of her body close to mine stirred something inside me that I hadn't felt in a long time. At the end of the night, as I walked Valerie to her door, she gave me a soft kiss on the lips and handed me her number. A few days later, I called to ask her out on a proper date. We made plans for dinner at one of the best Italian restaurants in town, followed by an art exhibit at a nearby gallery. When she showed up for our date, she looked even more stunning than she had at the Christmas party, dressed more provocatively but with an elegance that impressed me. We had a fantastic time, and after a few more dates, we decided it was time for our kids to meet. We spent a fun day playing mini-golf and having a picnic in the park. Valerie's daughter and Amelia bonded quickly, while Luke wasn't quite as enthusiastic, being at that age where he thought all girls had cooties. Over time, Valerie and I continued to see each other, and our families slowly began to blend together. It was easy, natural, and good for the most part. Then, a few weeks into the new school year, I got an unexpected call from Gloria. "I'm not sure what your girlfriend is teaching our kids," she fumed. "But Luke ended up in the principal's office today for fighting. His face is a mess, and he's been suspended for 3 days. He keeps talking about some Mona girl he calls his sister." I sighed, keeping my voice calm. "First of all, you don't get to insult Valerie. I'll come over after dinner and take Luke out for ice cream. Let's not jump to conclusions until we know what really happened." She sighed on the other end before hanging up. Later that evening, I picked up Luke and took him to our favorite family-owned ice cream parlor. He had a cut lip and a scratch on his face. "You should see the other guy, Dad," he joked. I wasn't amused. "What really happened?" "Nathan Abraham?" I asked, using his full name to let him know I was serious. He winced at the formality but answered honestly. "A kid was bullying Mo. I told him to stop, but he threw the first punch. So I hit him back. They say I broke his nose. It made a loud crack, and there was blood everywhere. The kid he'd fought was 2 years older than Luke." "Will Mo tell me the same story?" I asked. "Absolutely, Dad. I wouldn't have hit him if he hadn't started it. I was just defending Mo. You always tell me to protect Ally, so I thought that meant Mo too." "She's really small, Dad," Luke explained, looking sincere. He had a point. Mona was petite for her age, much smaller than her peers, and I had always taught Luke to look out for his sister. It was touching in a way that he now saw Mona as part of his family. "You did the right thing, Luke," I said, patting his shoulder. "But let's keep this between us for now. I'll talk to the principal and see what can be done. And maybe you should give your mom an update on Mo. It seems like you and Amelia haven't been keeping her in the loop, which, by the way, I appreciate." Luke smiled, clearly relieved. I knew we still had some things to sort out, but at least in this moment, everything felt like it was falling into place. Maybe it would be better if you told her, I said to Luke, and he nodded, fully understanding. Kids grow up fast these days, faster than I was ready for. And Dad, when are you and Valerie getting married? She's amazing, he added with a grin. He wasn't wrong. It was time to make that commitment. I had been thinking about it, and now, with Luke's words echoing in my mind, I knew it was time. The next day, I reached out to the principal regarding Luke's suspension. The school had a strict zero-tolerance policy on fighting, regardless of who started it. However, since they also had a no-tolerance rule for bullying, the kid who instigated the fight got a 6-day suspension after interviews with witnesses. While I didn't agree with their rigid policy, I told Luke to accept his punishment without causing a fuss. I promised him my full support and assured him that I would propose to Valerie as soon as I could afford the ring. Things took an interesting turn when Gloria found out that Valerie was my mom's personal assistant, and that my mom had been the one to set us up. "What the hell, Mom?" Gloria had screamed, according to my mother. "Aren't you supposed to be on my side?" "There's no your side, Gloria," Mom replied, calm as ever. "Ronald isn't coming back to you. You made sure of that. Valerie's a wonderful woman, and she deserves someone like him." Mom described Gloria's reaction as explosive, and I couldn't help but smirk at the thought. Both my kids adored Valerie, especially Amelia, who admired how nurturing she was. Valerie had a way of making me feel like the most important person in the world, and in return I treated her like a queen. Amelia enjoyed watching our relationship grow. "I'm not sure if you two are sweet or sickening," she teased one day, "but I love being around you both." A couple of months later, Valerie and I had a small, intimate wedding with just our 3 children, my parents, and my ex-in-laws. The court clerk who officiated the ceremony was a bit taken aback when my ex-mother-in-law stood as Valerie's maid of honor. "It's quite a story," I chuckled when she asked about the unusual arrangement. And just when I thought things were finally settling down, life threw another curveball. Federal marshals showed up at my office on a Monday morning. I felt blindsided when they explained they were investigating an incident involving a former senator. Yes, that senator, who had gotten into an altercation and was injured at a restaurant in Houston. Apparently, my name, along with the names of several other aggrieved husbands, had come up as potential suspects. "I can't say I'm sorry to hear about his troubles. He deserves every bit of it," I remarked to the marshals. "You do realize he slept with my wife almost 4 years ago, right? If I wanted to do something about it, don't you think I'd have acted sooner?" They didn't seem too interested in my sarcasm and left shortly after. But the interrogation wasn't the end of it. A week later, a reporter from the Associated Press showed up at my office, looking for details about the senator's affairs. He'd obtained a list of 26 women the senator allegedly had affairs with, and it wasn't long before Gloria's name surfaced as one of them. Gloria, unsurprisingly, was livid. "Why did you tell him?" she screamed over the phone. "I didn't," I replied, keeping my cool. "He told me your name was on the senator's list. All I did was confirm it. I wasn't about to lie to protect you from embarrassment." "I'm not promiscuous," she yelled before I hung up. I couldn't help but laugh. The whole situation was surreal. When the news finally broke, I briefly considered disappearing for a while, maybe taking a long vacation. But Valerie, always the level-headed one, convinced me otherwise. "Don't engage with it. Just stick to the truth. Gloria cheated on you, you divorced her, and you moved on," she advised wisely. Unfortunately, the real victims of the scandal were my kids, who had to deal with the fallout of their mother's actions. I knew they'd face teasing and bullying because of Gloria's affair, and we'd have to address the fact that their mother's reputation wasn't exactly spotless. I also felt for my ex-in-laws, who had become close friends of mine. After the article came out, I invited them to stay with us for a couple of weeks to avoid the media frenzy. During their stay, they mostly kept to themselves, staying indoors and not answering calls. "I love my daughter," Gloria's dad admitted to me one night, "but I'm deeply ashamed that she thought it was okay to engage in such behavior. No father wants his daughter to be seen that way." In time, the scandal died down and life slowly returned to normal. My kids started spending more time with Valerie, Mona, and me at our house, which became the neighborhood hangout spot. At first, Gloria objected to the arrangement, but over time, things smoothed out. I made sure Amelia and Luke kept open communication with their mom to avoid any accusations of alienation. My parents visited often, helping to ease tensions, and we kept discussions about Gloria to a minimum when the kids were with me. Though Gloria remained a part of the kids' lives, she was now just an ex in mine. Valerie took on a bigger role, and the kids grew to respect her, even calling her Mom at times. At first, Gloria's parents were uncomfortable with this, but they soon accepted it. After all, they had known and liked Valerie even before we were married. In the middle of all this, I paid little attention to Gloria's dating life. I knew from the kids' comments that she occasionally dated, but I wasn't prepared for the shock when Amelia casually mentioned one afternoon, "Mom's engaged." For a moment, a wave of sadness washed over me, thinking about what might have been. But then Valerie wrapped her arms around me, and just like that, my sadness melted into joy for what I had now.